I think what Gavin Newsom is trying to do right now is brand himself as the left's anti-Trump who understands technology and media and is willing to play dirty and play aggressive to take on Trump.
Elex Michaelson is the co-anchor of Fox 11 News weeknights. He also hosts The Issue Is. He's interviewed major political figures and moderated key debates. Elex has won 8 Emmys and 7 Golden Mics.
Why don't you think Republicans have a chance statewide, 2026?
Because the numbers still aren't there.
Let's talk about our governor for a sec. Do you think that Californians or Americans buy his sudden and obvious shift to the center ahead of 2028? Elex Michaelson, welcome to State of Gold.
Thanks so much for having me, and thanks for what you're doing. There needs to be more conversation in this space. There certainly isn't enough of it, so I appreciate your effort to bring attention to these issues.
Oh, I really appreciate that. Thank you for the kind words. You're softening me up at the beginning of the interview. I really appreciate that. I should be doing that to you because you're a real star. You're a real star in Los Angeles. You're at the epicenter of Los Angeles politics. So I want to start with that and topics you know probably better than anyone. How are Angelenos feeling right now, post fires, post downtown riots?
I think if you had to pick one word, it would be anxious. I think people are uneasy. What we've also seen, and we saw this really in the mayor's race a couple of years ago, is there really are at least 2 different Los Angeleses. There's the Los Angeles west of the 405 and the Los Angeles east of the 405.
Right.
If there was a mayor of the west of the 405, that would have been Rick Caruso a few years ago. And Karen Bass is the mayor east of the 405. So you have this situation in January in the Palisades fire west of the 405, which absolutely devastated that community, a community that largely voted for Caruso in the first place, that is still reeling and frustrated with city government, feeling like they're not getting the answers that they need and feeling that they're kind of forgotten. And then you have this situation with the raids east of the 405, targeting largely brown communities, that is not really being felt that much west of the 405. You don't see a lot of people pulling up to Brentwood parking lots, bringing people in for these situations. And so that community now feels targeted and anxious. And you see, both of these things with just sort of a sense of unease about where we're going and who's in control and anger at leadership and a feeling that things are not going in the right direction.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Let's talk about Mayor Bass for a minute because you helped us segue there and city leadership. How would you grade her performance through the last 6 months, all of the tumult, and just the basic delivery of city services right now for people?
Well, as a reporter, it's complicated for me I'm not going to give somebody a grade because that's not really my place, but I'll just try to analyze, what we've seen on the ground. In terms of the fire, I think even Bass would admit that the initial response to that did not go well. Obviously, the decision to be in Ghana was a mistake. There's a lot of questions still about why she chose to go there, despite so many of us knowing that there was severe fire weather coming.
Right.
And then her sort of lack of communication skills afterwards in not doing interviews, in not answering a lot of questions, and being pretty defensive about things from the moment that fire started, and certainly from the moment she got off the plane when that reporter from overseas came up to her and started asking her questions and she didn't say anything. It was a political disaster. And there were real world consequences to what was happening there because of that as well. It seems like the mayor has learned her lesson in terms of that. Her response to the raids has been kind of the opposite. She's been everywhere doing a lot of interviews, doing digital media, TV, radio. She's been all over that issue. Frankly, it's an issue that's much better for her politically. It's pretty simple. If you are a Democratic official in the deeply, deeply Democratic city of Los Angeles, and Donald Trump is posing what people see as sort of an existential threat to your way of life, being against Donald Trump is a good place to be. She's been able to rally the base. She's had events that were called press conferences, which were actually just a bunch of Democratic officials standing behind her and clapping for her, which is sending the message, she's not Trump, we hate Trump, she's fighting for you because she's not Trump. And that may be enough in Los Angeles, which is one of the most democratic cities in the country. Is that getting the results for people? That's another question. But the politics of it for Bass right now are pretty good. She would say, look at the last week or two that I've had. We have the homeless count went down marginally. Homicides are at a 60-year low in Los Angeles. We defeated Donald Trump in court, where he at least temporarily can't continue the same kinds of raids that he was doing. She would say, look at the Army Corps of Engineers, the recovery's speeding up in terms of debris removal. So she would say all that is wins for Karen Bass. But it is interesting that we've gone from a place where in February, you would have said she's a dead man walking politically. And now you'd probably have to say she's probably the front runner to win re-election.
Yeah, well, those political breezes, don't they shift so quickly back and forth based on events on the ground? Let's talk about, though, the Palisades and Malibu for a minute, because the whole nation was gripped, right, just over 6 months ago with the terrible tragedies there. I've got tons and tons of friends. I live in Northern California, but we've all got tons of friends who lost something or lost everything in those tragedies. What's it like on the ground right now in terms of recovery? And how are citizens who live in those parts of the county feeling about the city and the state in terms of their support for the recovery?
So I think pretty much everybody involved have given credit to the Trump administration, actually, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for the debris removal. That was their responsibility, was to get all this toxic stuff out of there as quickly as possible. And they're way ahead of schedule, and that's actually worked pretty well. The next phase is the complicated phase, is the permitting and the rebuilding. There's a lot of frustration of the fact that the permitting process has moved very slow. Permitting was never fast in LA before the fires, and now you've got thousands of people potentially submitting permits at the same time. There is some good news that we just got within the last week or so, and that's the example that I'm sure you would appreciate, the idea of business working with government to come up with some tech-friendly solutions that actually make sense. So Rick Caruso started what's called Steadfast LA, which is this nonprofit organization of all these different business leaders from around Los Angeles coming together saying, how can we use our skills and expertise to solve some of these problems? Well, one of the problems was permitting doesn't make sense. It moves too slow. Somebody from Amazon said, we've got this technology, this company called Archistar. It can do AI permit plan check process. And so they're just implementing that now, where you can submit your work to this AI technology. That it's been something that's been embraced by the city, it's been embraced by the state, it's been embraced by the county. And the concept is that your permit that used to take potentially weeks or months now could only take hours because it's being done through computerized AI technology. So that's just starting. We'll see how it works. Sometimes when government implements things, it doesn't always work right at first. But I think that's a good first step to try to find a creative way to deal with some of these issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I've heard about that effort, and I'm not surprised it came from Rick. I want to come back to Rick in a minute, because there's lots to talk about regarding what he's going to decide to do and how he's going to decide to do it, like what party banner. He's kind of confusing in that way. Can we talk about Newsom for a minute? I know this is a bit of a shift, and why not, right? Let's talk about our governor for a sec. To me and to many, he's been shape-shifting before our very eyes, right? He's got his podcast. I don't think he's a particularly good podcast host, but he's had some interesting guests. He's talking to right-leaning individuals. He's doing his thing. Do you think that Californians or Americans buy his sudden and obvious shift to the center ahead of 2028?
Well, I actually would contend that he's shifted back from the center. I would say that he tried out shifting to the center and it didn't work out that well from him because I don't think a lot of people were buying it. So he's made the determination to actually shift to the left. I think what Gavin Newsom is trying to do right now is brand himself as the left's anti-Trump who understands technology and media and is willing to play dirty and play aggressive to take on Trump. And that is actually working for him if his objective is to win over Democratic primary voters in early states. Let's assume that his main objective right now is not communicating to the people of California and being focused on California issues.
I would agree.
But his main objective is to try to win over Democrats so he can win the Democratic primary nationally. And if that is his objective, what he's been doing in the last few months since he launched the podcast and it didn't really work or didn't really help him, he's shifted strategy. And if you notice, he is going after Donald Trump the most aggressively of anybody. He's using his social media and including his taxpayer-funded Governor Press account to troll the president constantly. He tweets way more about Donald Trump than he does about affordable housing or permit reform or any of this other stuff. But his numbers are going up. His social media followers are up. His fundraising is up. His popularity in the Democratic primary is up. That strategy seems to be working because I think Democrats nationwide are so frustrated by what they see as weakness from their own party leadership and so frustrated by being essentially manhandled by Donald Trump with the party that has found no way to stop him, that they like this idea of somebody fighting.
Yeah, that's such a cogent summary of what's going on. Really smart. I really appreciate that. I think it's confusing, though, for those following him a little more closely or watching his podcast or watching his media appearances, because he's cozying up to right-leaning figures. He's talking policy, and his shifts in communication on policy feel rightward. And yet you're right. In terms of his main effort, it's positioning for 2028, position for 2028 in the primaries. You've got a position to the core of the parties.
But he's doing that. He's trying to do both at the same time. And he's also trying to now see what he initially did wrong with the Charlie Kirk podcast. And also the Steve Bannon podcast is you said he was a bad podcast host. He was, because what he did was he just sort of sat there and didn't really ask them probing questions, which is bad as a podcast host to begin with if you're just a podcast host. But if you're the Democratic governor of the largest state in the country, the most blue state in the country, and you're just sitting there and saying, I appreciate that, or I agree with that, and not really having a dialogue, that's not interesting as a podcast, but it's also not effective as a political strategy. If his approach with Charlie Kirk was, Charlie Kirk, let's go mano a mano, let's duke this out.
Right.
And he was strongly standing up for the values of the left, that would have played very differently. So I think Newsom saw that, and he's now adjusted. And even as he goes on to some of these more conservative shows, he's doing so with more swagger, and he's cussing, and he's trying to be manlier, and he's putting on a different persona than just, yeah, I agree with that, I appreciate that. And so he's trying to show, one, I'm not afraid to go into these spaces that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were afraid to go into, and so many of the Democratic Party is afraid to go into. But now once I do, I'm going to try to be masculine and strong and tough in a way that other people in the party aren't. That's what he's trying to do. Will it work?
Yeah.
Do people believe it? That's a whole nother thing.
I think operative phrase is trying to be. I think someone said to me recently, in one of the conversations that we had, it was Dan Schnurr, who's obviously, I'm sure you're familiar with and know Dan.
My old professor.
Yes. And one of the most astute observers of politics in California. I said, what's the biggest communication lesson that you've learned and that you teach your students? And he said, you know what? The number one thing is, after decades of doing this, is that people smell authenticity and people smell inauthenticity. That's why I think Newsom is ceiling limited for national politics, in my view.
And which is why Trump has been as effective as he is. I mean, obviously he BS's a lot more than anybody, but a lot of his sort of core, who he is, always comes out whenever he tries to read a prompter. Even he gets bored with it, and then you see the real version of Trump. And I think that's part of the reason why people appreciate him, even if they don't always agree with him. And it's part 100%. Of the reason he's been so successful. And 100%. Great podcast with Dan, by the way. I watched that. It was excellent.
Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Let's talk about two other things, Alex. 2026 is coming really fast in California. Blink of an eye, will be there. We've got all the constitutional officers up for election. They're all Democrats, as we know. Democrats have been running the state for basically a generation. Some would say running it into the ground with uni-party rule. Let's come back to Rick Caruso for a minute. Super impressive guy. I had the chance to meet him once when I was in the real estate business. Is he going to run for governor? And under which banner? I believe he's been a Democrat, Republican, Independent at different points in his career. What's he going to do?
I think he's going to run for either governor or mayor. He hasn't decided yet. I asked him that question on camera yesterday, and he punted on it again and said that he's going to make a decision after the summer, which is interesting because Kamala Harris said that she's going to make her decision by the end of the summer, and he's saying after the summer, which means he's probably waiting for Kamala Harris to make his decision so then he can decide which race to get into. And when you've got, as you know, $1 billion, you can do that. I mean, the main reason that everybody's in the race right now, even though the election's not until next year, is because they all need to raise money. Well, Rick Caruso doesn't need to raise as much money because he can pay for a lot of this himself. Kamala Harris doesn't need to raise as much money because she's got 100% name ID. People either like her or don't like her, but it's not like you need to run an ad to introduce who Kamala Harris is. So that's why the two of them are sort of exceptions to the rule when everybody else is trying to raise money right now. And a lot of people won't give them money because they're waiting to see if Rick Caruso or Kamala Harris is going to get in. So it's a weird place. Rick would almost certainly run as a Democrat. I think he understands that the state is so Democratic, 25% more Democrats than Republicans, that there really isn't a path to run as a Republican. Running as an independent sounds great, but has never really worked in terms of statewide office. And even though that's probably what he really is, he's really an independent who's sort of center left, center right. That's kind of what he is. But I think he would run as a Democrat. Part of the reason why he gave money to Kamala Harris and made a point about hosting a fundraiser for her when she was running for president to sort of prove to people that he's a Democrat. And if you look at a lot of his comments he's put out about the immigration raids to try to be on the sort of left side of that, that gives you an indication that's where he would go. The question is, is there room in the top two system if Kamala Harris gets in for Rick Caruso to be in the top two, or would a traditional Republican like a Steve Hilton or Chad Bianco or somebody else who is a Republican running as a Republican, being blunt about their support for Donald Trump, are they able to get 25-30% of the vote and end up in the top two if they consolidate Republican support and keep Rick Caruso out of the top two?
Yeah. To Kamala for 1 minute, do you think she runs?
Well, I think she runs for something. I mean, that's what her team said.
Oh, you're punting on that. I mean,
she's either going to run for president or, well, at the beginning of this process, there were three options. She runs for president, she runs for governor, or she runs for nothing at all. And maybe she serves on boards and write a book and, sort of leaves us. At this point, that third option seems to be out the window. So she's going to run for one of the two. Obviously, winning governor would be a way easier task than winning president. Not for sure. I mean, it's not like a total complete slam dunk for her to win governor, but it's a pretty clear path. Winning president is really hard, and it's kind of hard to see how she does it. That being said, she wants to be president. She's always wanted to be president. That's why she ran for president twice now. And once you're in that space and you're used to flying on Air Force Two and Air Force One sometimes and sitting in the Situation Room and meeting with world leaders and having the Democratic Convention and all of that, you want to be in like Sacramento? Do you want to be doing in the Central Valley talking about farming issues? No, both of those are interesting, and I love Sacramento. But you just what I mean. It's like a different thing. She's now in a different place in her life, and I don't know if she wants to do that. You never really hear Kamala Harris talk about state issues. You never really hear Rick Caruso talk about state issues. By the way, he's wanted to be mayor his whole life. Like he comes out now, he talks about LA issues. You don't hear him talking about housing regulation at the state level. Like he talks about LA issues. And it's crazy that both of them may end up running for governor, even though that's not the job probably in their heart that they actually want.
Those are really interesting observations. And, you can tell a lot about someone in terms of just core passion, what they speak about. That is a window into people's minds and souls. So it's an interesting observation. Let's talk about the Republicans just to close before we do our rapid fire, Alex. You mentioned that you alluded to the fact that Republicans have a big wall, a big high wall in front of them to run and win statewide. And yet what I'm seeing 1 month into launching this podcast with our most recent episode this past Tuesday, garnering tens and tens and tens of thousands of views and hundreds of comments. And I'm reading all of the comments. And of course, you can argue, who comments on YouTube? Well, very activated people, right, on a certain issue. But the number of thoughtful comments, the number of angry comments, the number of data-driven comments just about the situation in California, equally divided between current California residents and those who left and are looking back and saying, listen, I've got gas that's under $3. You guys have voted for your leaders, and you're now in the situation that you voted for. It seems like there's a groundswell of anger that's rising up in California. Why don't you think Republicans have a chance statewide 2026?
I didn't say they don't have a chance, because you got to
But a
always
good
be
chance.
open to stuff. Because the numbers still aren't there. At least they haven't demonstrated to be there. There is no question that the momentum is on the side of the Republicans, that the momentum is on the side of the state moving right, that there's a pushback and a feeling that a lot of the policies of the left have gone too far. But the question is, can you get there enough? So, like, for example, Joe Biden wins California by 30 and Kamala Harris wins by 25. Now, obviously the momentum's moving towards Trump, but she's still got a lot of pad. So the gap between the two is just still pretty great, that it's hard to imagine it overcoming. And frankly, what Trump is doing now, which may help him nationally on the immigration raids, only helps the Democratic Party in California. I mean, if you're interested in sort of a campaign and a candidate who's all about statewide issues, leave what's happening in Washington behind. Let's talk about housing affordability. Let's talk about homelessness. Let's talk about crime. Let's talk about our unions issues. Let's talk about gas prices, all the things that you are focusing in on. That's getting distracted when you have these immigration raids, which only drives people to their partisan core. And it makes it impossible to have another conversation. So if especially the president finds that it's in his best interest to attack California for his own political benefit, that nationalizes all of these local races and makes it hard to have the conversation that the state needs to have, and makes it even harder for Republicans to win. Because it reminds people, oh yeah, that's a Republican and they support Donald Trump, instead of that's a Republican who has really thoughtful ideas on how to get permitting sped up so we don't have this same problem, and they're going to keep the water on during our next fire and not be focused on DEI issues instead of pre-deploying to the Palisades. Right?
Yeah.
And so that's part of the issue right now, is how do you do that? So the question is probably not, can a Republican win that's very pro-Trump right now in California? It's very hard to see the math of that. The sort of more interesting thing is, can a centrist Democrat like a Caruso or somebody, or like a Matt Mahan in San Jose, somebody that's kind of running against the system, sort of thread that needle, end up in a top two, be able to bring up these issues that people actually listen to, challenge the party orthodoxy, and bring the party more to the center to address some of this stuff, which is where a lot of the energy is. I mean, look at Prop 36, right? The anti-crime bill that last time came around. Every statewide leader, the governor, the Speaker of the House, the Speaker of the Assembly, I should say, the Senate pro tem, all of them said, don't vote for this thing. 70% of the state did. That was the Democratic Party giving a big middle finger to the Democratic leadership, saying, guys, you are not listening to us on crime. We don't feel safe. You're not doing a good enough job on homelessness. Change your act, and we're going to change it for you. I mean, that was a real warning shot. Now, the question is, has the politics even changed since then because of some of this nationalization?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, those are really interesting points, and I think you're right. There's a huge amount of distraction from the true California issues, and I think what I would say about this is that my diagnosis is that California's issues are man-made. Are the policies that have been executed in this state over the last 10 to 20 years, and around these core issues that California residents care most about, like affordability, least affordable state in the nation,
Number one issue.
like upward mobility, the least upward mobile state in the nation. These kitchen table issues that are affecting the working poor and working class, where ironically, our citizens have been let down by the Democratic Party from a policy perspective. The very people have been let down are the very people the Democratic Party says they're for. And there's just a very cruel irony.
I think a lot of people agree with that. I mean, you saw the way the Democrats embraced that Ezra Klein, Derek Thompson book, Abundance, which was basically shitting all over the party. Saying you
Yeah.
guys have done a horrible job. Everybody's like, read this. We need this. This is our Bible now, which was interesting that happened, that Newsom brought them on his podcast and sent it to all the state's leadership, said like, we need to get to this. So it seems like there's even an acknowledgement among some of them. The question is, are voters ready to vote with somebody with an R next to their name? So far, that has not been the case, but maybe it gets so bad that people start to think that way.
All right, from your mouth up there, Alex. All right,
embracing anything.
With this.
I don't endorse anything.
Oh, I hear you. Let's finish with 5 rapid fire questions. These are just like one phrase, one word, gut responses. You're king for a day. What do you do to fix California?
Improve the public education system and make it more fair for everybody, to give everybody an actual equal opportunity.
What do outsiders get wrong about California?
That we all think exactly alike. I think there's a diversity of opinion in this state, and it's not what the sort of generic narrative is.
The stereotype. Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, certainly. If I call my relatives or in-laws in Texas, they definitely have a certain view.
The land of fruits and nuts.
Fruits and nuts.
I heard when I went there.
You know what's funny is we've gotten 500 YouTube comments on our last episode, and I can't tell you how many times people are combining California. They're saying, hey, you deserve it. You're now Mexifornia, or you're now Fruitifornia. I mean, people go nuts with the fruit and nut analogies. That's for sure. What gives you hope about California?
The people.
Amen. Last one. California is fill in the blank.
The greatest state in the country and one of the most important places in the world. And I'm privileged to be a native Californian, and it's worth fighting for.
Yeah, boy, that's a rallying cry that I get behind as well.
Vote for me.
Vote for Elex. Gonna fix it. All right, my friend. Thank you so much for your time. A great conversation.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate everything you're doing down there as well.